This is a show that brings to the forefront newsmakers, entertainers, and those making a difference in our lives and in our world. Each week is a new adventure with topics ranging from the most serious and cutting edge to the most lighthearted and entertaining.
This is Taking Care of Business with Richard Solomon.
Greetings, everyone. Richard Solomon and Antonio Saillant. This is Taking Care of Business and Rocket Green Radio. How are you this fine day? We have a wonderful guest. We have Lew Blaustein, who is greensportsblog.com, and we're going to talk about sustainability in sports. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I look forward to talking about a topic, the greening of sports, that needs a lot more air. So it's great to be on your air. Well,
thank you so much. So how did you get involved in this? Because, sports is sort of everywhere. And yet what I notice, it's like the least green of anything we do.
Well, yep. It's
except for the AstroTurf, pun intended.
Right. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Like I'll tell my story, hopefully briefly, and then you'll be surprised, I think, as to how much the sports world is greening. But it's a marriage of my two passions: sports. I've been a sports nut since I was 7, and I always knew I wanted to work in sports. And I also knew back then that I wasn't a good athlete. So I wanted to be a sportscaster, and I tried that for a while, but couldn't make a full-time living of it. So then I went into the sports business, working in sports advertising, marketing, sponsorship, sales for a couple of companies, one of which you've heard of, which is Sports Illustrated and Sports Illustrated for Kids. And so I was doing that, and I was getting to go to the World Series and the World Cup and the NBA Finals and all of that, and it was great. But in parallel, I was a lowercase e, I would call it, environmentalist, meaning my passion for the environment, while strong, didn't rise to the level of sports, my sports passion. And then 9/11 happened. I'm a lifelong resident of the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and was living in Manhattan and working at Sports Illustrated for Kids at the time. And unfortunately, just in my own personal sense, I didn't know anybody in the buildings, but it was something that changed everything, and I felt like I had to do something. And I got motivated. It's going to sound hokey, but by a column by the columnist Tom Friedman, who writes in the New York Times and has won Pulitzer Prizes for his books, like The World is Flat. And he wrote a column about 3 months or 4 months after 9/11 saying, green is the new red, white, and blue. And the idea that we were, 4% of the world's population, 25% of the world's energy use, and we were fueling the wars on terrorism, whatever you thought about them, by our profligate energy use. And it was like the compact fluorescent light bulb went on above my head, and I bought a hybrid car. I changed out all my light bulbs. I became almost a vegetarian, got rid of my car. And then I said, I gotta do this with my work. So, and then I got motivated by climate change after that. And I became a sustainability consultant in sales, marketing, and business development, what I had been doing in sports. So I've been doing that since 2005. About 4 or 5 years later, I thought, hey, is there an intersection of green and sports? And because I poke around, I'm curious, and I found out that there was a nascent movement and a trade group called the Green Sports Alliance, which at that time, the beginning was of pro teams in Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver, not surprisingly very green area, that were thinking about how do we recycle more and what do we do about energy efficient lighting at the stadiums. And now that's grown to 400 or 500 teams, and it's the world over. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write a blog about this because at the beginning it was because that'll get me to meet people in this world and I'll get new consulting business, which that's happened. But then I found that I love to write, and people loved the way I wrote. So it's kind of built from there. It started in 2013, and now now 4+ years into it. So that's the story.
Do you get a lot of pushback? Because people tend to be set in their ways. So, do you get pushback when you present ideas for change or innovation?
I would say in the sports world, it's not so much pushback. It's more that people are just unaware. And, I think maybe because I'm just writing about this stuff. So I'm writing about the cool stories that are happening from, say, Ohio State University football, which is not in a green hotbed like Seattle or Boulder, let's say. It's in Columbus, Ohio, and they are a zero-waste stadium, which means they divert 90% or more of their waste from landfill via composting and recycling. But so that is happening, and I write about it. Now, if you're underlying that question, does that mean, is there pushback amongst people kind of anti the green sports movement? Not really. There may be, because most people don't know about it yet. That's what I am trying to, in a way, I would like there to be pushback, because then there would be more people who knew about it, and it would. But so my sole kind of my main focus is to get through this blog, to the extent that I can, to get the green sports movement known, and to get fans in the broad sense to know that this is happening and to care about it. So that I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, you're spreading basically positive change within the sports industry, but you're using the sports industry when they're being sustainable and they're going sustainable. You write about it, and you hope that the audience just looks at it and says, wow, this is happening. And then they take it home with them, and they teach their kids, and it spreads a message all over the place, which is beautiful. That's a big part of it, but I also do, because I look at it as a journalistic site. So if there is greenwashing, let's say, which there has been some examples of that over the years that I've been doing this, I'll report on it. Also, what I will do, because it's not, so I'm a relatively small but growing voice, but to me, where the rubber meets the road on this is, it can be great that the Super Bowl is zero waste, or that there's solar panels on the roof at Fenway Park and many other stadiums. But if those great stories, and there are many others, are not told to the fans via the media, and I'm talking major media, I'm talking CBS, ESPN, and NBC Sports, etc. Sure.
Then it's like it's like a tree falling in a forest, and no one's there to hear it. So if I put my pressure point is on the media, because I believe these stories are great and important and need to be told, and the major media for whatever reasons, have not told them to the extent that I think that and I think that they're making a mistake, because I think their audience would find it interesting.
Do you talk about the economic advantages of being green in your blog?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Could you enhance that discussion?
Well, so for example, probably the best known example, the most widely known example of the sports greening movement, is that the National Hockey League now is just about to embark on the 4th year of its fourth carbon neutral season. And what does that mean? That means that for all of the emissions that the NHL controls, both direct and indirect, so the emissions of the at the 30 arenas and at their training facilities, and then the transportation of the players and staff to and from games and so forth, and to an extent, they're also for their supply chains. The NHL is, let's say they had emissions of X. Over time, they're trying to reduce those emissions significantly, and then whatever they can't completely reduce or eliminate, they offset through carbon credit purchases and carbon offsets, which is a pretty big deal. Now, why would they do this? Well, there's a heritage of hockey being played outdoors on frozen ponds in places like, Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and Bemidji, Minnesota, and that is the stated reason, and it is, I'd say, the main reason. But another big reason is that energy efficiency saves money, and the NHL has, and there's 30, teams in the U.S. and Canada, and they're interested in saving money, these owners and the people who run the teams. Also, there is a revenue generation part to this because they are selling sponsorships. Constellation is their energy partner, and they are the company that is managing the offsets and the renewable energy credits and also doing the energy efficiency work at most, if not all, of the arenas. So they're, on the one hand, saving money by becoming more energy efficient, and they are gaining revenue by sponsorship. And, less proven, but maybe over the long haul, will be a knock-on effect is that they'll get more loyal or perhaps more fans, people who care about it. But those first two things are big reasons. Those first two are the big reasons as to why the NHL is going this way, aside from the fact that the outdoor hockey season is being curtailed by climate change effects.
Well, I noticed that. I'm sorry.
No,
I noticed that, for example, ski season has changed a lot.
Oh my gosh! Well, the ski industry, so the winter sports industry, yes. In terms of where I say, they're not talking about it enough. Okay, the winter sports industry, especially the snow sports industry, they're all over it, and this is one where the athletes themselves are getting involved, and we can talk about eco athletes and perhaps a relative lack of them, but in the snow sports world, in fact, they have a group called POW, or Protect Our Winters, which is, made up of elite. We're talking Olympians and World Cup champions and in various skiing and Nordic, alpine and Nordic skiing and snowboarding and things like that. And they're a big force in the U.S., Canada, and globally.
So in terms of innovation, aside from like the NHL chopping up all the ice and putting in everybody's mixed drinks at the end of the season, what are the innovations that you actually see that are surprising to you?
Well, what I see is that I can't say that the sports industry itself has been the innovator in, say, a clean technology, but what I do think is innovative is the way they employ the technologies that have been developed, for other industries or by other industries. So, for example, the Cleveland Indians and now the New York Yankees and some other stadiums have anaerobic digesters, which basically provide, for lack of a better term, on-site composting of the front of house, the food that the food waste that the fans create is composted, not all of it, but some of it on site by these high-tech anaerobic digester products. And you're also seeing, where do you see innovation? And actually, one cool area where the technology is, being developed for the sports world is in the motorsports industry. There is Formula One, right?
Right, sure.
Right. Well, now there's Formula E. Formula E is an electric vehicle, open wheel racing circuit that now I believe is 4 or 5 years old, and they had they're all over the world, and they are they're getting big time drivers, and Richard Branson is one of the investors in one of the teams. So they're getting big investors, and they in fact had a big 2-race weekend event in Brooklyn, where the cars were just humming very quietly but going very fast, and I think 30,000 people showed up.
How fast can a Formula E car go?
It goes about 125 at this point, and the range, I want to say, is 200 miles. I might be a little bit off on some of those numbers, but not by much.
How did they?
So it's not as fast as the Formula One, and they don't go as far, but it's further than they went 3 or 4 years ago, and faster than they went 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, technology's getting better, and as it gets better, it's going to get faster. Trust me. It's just
we only have
history has it.
We only have a minute left. We only have a minute left in this segment, just so you know. Go ahead.
Okay, I got one other really cool story on innovation, and this is from an eco-athlete. His name is Mathieu Flamini. He played for Arsenal soccer and other big clubs in Europe, and also the French national team. While doing that, he and a buddy developed a biomass company kind of on the sly that now is bringing to market an innovation, like a major innovation in the biomass world.
Wow.
And he did this completely on the fly.
All right.
So I got some good stories. So there's an innovative story for you right there.
All right. This is Richard Solomon, Antonio Saillant, and our special guest, Lew Blaustein, greensportsblog.com. We have to take a quick break. Keep it right here. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Jeff Mattson of Dark Star Orchestra, and you're listening to Richard Solomon on WCWP 88.1 FM.
Richard Solomon and Antonio Saillant welcoming you back to Taking Care of Business and Rocket Green Radio with our guest, Lew Blaustein from greensportsblog.com. And we're talking about sustainability in sports. Now, Lew, you talk about all kinds of sports, professional, amateur, indoor, outdoor, wet, dry, cold, the whole bit, right? Everything.
You got it.
All right.
You got it. And it's not, and it's all, and we cover it the world over.
Yeah, you did. Didn't you do a story on a woman recently that did a whole? She was like head of being sustainable in the Olympics, like the stadium. Didn't you do a story on?
We've written about. We've covered I call it the mega sports events, which are the Olympics and the World Cup are the two biggest mega sports events. And then there's the Super Bowl, the Rugby World Cup. But let's just say the Soccer World Cup and the Olympics are they have audiences in the billions, right? And so,
right.
The Olympics, the Olympic movement has been greening itself for quite some time, with the London Olympics 2012 being kind of the high watermark in terms of sustainability of the entirety of the Olympic footprint, the Olympic Village, the way that they dealt with waste, the way that they dealt with transportation. London 2012 was kind of the high watermark. Then you had Sochi in Russia in 2014, not so good. Rio, you had some serious problems that were well documented in terms of environmental problems with the bodies of water where the sailing and the boating, the rowing were happening, but they also did some very good things there, and they did at the opening ceremonies of the Rio Games, which was viewed by over 1 billion people worldwide, they did a 7 to 8 minute vignette within the opening ceremonies on climate change, which was seen by 1 billion people. So that was the biggest thing. I think the interview you're probably referring to is I talked to the woman who is running sustainability for the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, South Korea, and the really interesting, the many interesting things they're doing there sustainability-wise, including a massive use of electric vehicles, including electric buses, which are really new to the marketplace, and they're going to be pioneered in Pyeongchang.
Wow, that's excellent. Excellent.
One question that I have is, the Olympics always move the cities around. And is that a sustainability problem, always having a city and then rebuilding the city? I know it creates jobs and all this other stuff, but is that a problem?
I think you're onto something there. I actually, yes, in my view, I think that, and I actually think that the Olympic movement is getting it, in part for environmental sustainability reasons, but even more so for financial sustainability reasons. Why do I say that? Well, look, they just announced, or they recently announced that for the first time ever, they awarded 2 Olympic Games at once. The 2024 Olympics went to Paris, and the 2028 Summer Olympics are going to Los Angeles. And what do both of those cities have in common? They both have hosted 2 Olympics before. And so that means they have infrastructure that exists, and both of their big selling points were that they don't have to build new stuff. And that was appealing because a lot of taxpayers in a lot of cities don't want huge expenditures to go to build Olympic facilities. That is a huge driver of this going back to places where the Olympics have already been. And then, in the same token, there is the environmental sustainability aspect of it. You don't have to, expend all this carbon to build all this new stuff. And actually, I should also mention that 2022 in the Winter Games is going to Beijing. Now, you're saying, wait, Beijing never hosted a Winter Olympics. That's true. But they did host the Summer Olympics in 2008. And so some of those venues from 2008 are going to be transformed into winter venues for 2022. And so I think not by design, but by necessity, your question about going to new places all the time is actually being answered in the way we would want them to answer it.
Well, one insight, I guess, that I seem to always ask is, okay, you have all this building activity, so there's all this investment. The Olympics are not really known as being a real moneymaker. And then you have all this infrastructure left over. And then they say, yeah, but we're going to use it. Is all of the venues that are built, the hotels and the arenas and all the other things that they make, do they ever really get used to a full extent in the aftermath of the Olympics by the local people?
The track record isn't great. And again, that is just that is getting us back to that place of that's why they're going back to Paris and Los Angeles, because in those places those facilities have been around. The last time the Olympics were in Paris was 1920 something. Obviously, they're using some more modern facilities than that, but they have a big time sporting infrastructure there. Los Angeles is, they had the Olympics there in 1984. So, but if you go back, 2016 Rio, they built a golf course in Rio. Very few people play golf. They built soccer stadiums for the World Cup in Rio, which was in 2014, just 2 years before the Olympics. Not in Rio, in Brazil, all throughout Brazil. Mm-hmm. And some of those stadiums are in places that are impossible to get to, and they'll never be used. 2012 London, that's an example of where the facilities are being used, both the sporting facilities. The Olympic Village is now, I believe, affordable housing there. There's a lot of development in the area where the Olympic Village was and the main Olympic Stadium was, which was not a big residential area before. So 2012 London is an example of one that worked. Athens 2004, no, not good. Sydney 2000, definitely problems. Atlanta, for all of the criticism of crass commercialism that was there, the Atlanta facilities, I think, Atlanta's Olympic footprint has been pretty well, kind of adapted to the city of Atlanta post the games. So, I'd say mixed reaction there.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question about, Richard, let me ask him a question about golf. Because a lot of golf courses, and I read this, and I have friends that always complain when it comes to being sustainable, a lot of golf places are saying that they're sustainable, but then they waste. I'm not going to say waste because they water the grass, to keep it green, but it's a lot of water they're using. You're just talking about gallons every day, and there are people that are saying that that's ridiculous. It's a waste of water. Because especially California, at that time there was a shortage, and they're wasting water, a lot of it. So how did you get around that? Because I had consultants say that they should put artificial turf on the areas that you don't hit a golf ball, and keep the when wherever they're playing golf. And wherever the balls are, the holes are, that's where the grass should be. Because you can't play golf on artificial turf. There is a difference,
Could I add to that?
Your drive would go a heck of a lot longer.
Yeah.
The question for me, in addition to Antonio's very insightful comment, is the use of all the pesticides and weed killers. A lot of golf courses have water, and then they have, birds and things like that. And they do all these things to control, bird activity, weed activity. They use artificial fertilizers and things like that. And that can't really be great for groundwater.
No. So there's two different, two parts to what you guys were saying. And these are really good topics that are related, but I'll treat them separately for a second. First, in terms of water use and in terms of golf as a sustainable and environmentally sustainable sport, it's always going to be problematic because of the massive use of water to just be able to keep the grass green and to keep the fairway beautiful and all of that. That said, there is if we're in a climate changed world 50, 100 years down the road, and who knows what golf will look like. But in the world that we have now, right? In the world that we have now, in the world that we have now, there are movements afoot to make golf less environmentally taxing. How about that? So there's a group called Golf Environment Organization, which is based out of, not surprisingly, Scotland, and they have created a sustainable golf kind of toolkit for course superintendents, from the municipal courses all the way to the most fancy country clubs and the courses that are used for PGA Tour events. The PGA of America, which is separate from the PGA Tour. The Tour is, like Jordan Spieth and those people. The PGA of America are the club professionals. They have a sustainability initiative. And then getting to the other question about pesticides and pollutants, which is a big concern. As part of these sustainability movements, there is a huge education going on amongst course superintendents to go to low or no pesticide golf course management. And this is actually taking shape taking hold in the U.S. and in Europe as well, and at some top courses. The most notable that is operated in such a manner is Chambers Bay, which I believe hosted the 2015 or 16 U.S. Open out in the Seattle area. And, I would love it to be able to write a story that Augusta National was going this way, and that then Jim Nantz would say a tradition unlike any other sustainable golf on a Sunday. But that hasn't happened yet, but that's just on my wish list.
Which sporting events have the greatest distance to catch up? It seems like golf is on that list.
Golf is on that list. I mean, it's funny, NASCAR, which actually NASCAR has NASCAR Green, but which is doing a lot of cool things in the auto racing world, and there is a lot going on in three of the four biggest solar stadiums or sports venues in the world are auto racing venues. That said, and that's because they're so big. But that said, I mean, auto racing, you think golf has got environmental issues? How about auto racing? So I would say they have the biggest distance to travel, both in terms of the sport that the sport itself, and then also, and getting the fan base to care about this. But I give NASCAR credit with NASCAR Green for a good first and maybe even second steps. But they have a long way to go. I would say that among the major, let's say, 5 pro sports in the U.S., meaning baseball, football, basketball, hockey, soccer, I'll put soccer in there. The NFL has the longest way to go, even though they've gone, the Super Bowl has been carbon neutral for a decade or more, and now they're doing the same thing with the NFL draft. The league is not yet in the Green Sports Alliance, and I don't sense that sustainability at the league level is a big deal, and the league has huge other problems and issues that they're dealing with, but you got to walk and chew issues gum at the same time, and I think that they haven't yet. Whereas if you look at the National Hockey League, they have a guy, his job is sustainability. That's like,
well, does it help the NHL that they're just smaller?
It helps the NHL. I think really what it helps with the NHL is it goes back to the outdoor pond hockey. It comes down from Gary Bettman, the commissioner. He sees that that's the heritage of the sport, and that heritage is being frittered away. Major League Baseball has, from when Bud Selig was the commissioner, he was actually one of the early, top sports executives who really got into this. going back, I want to say 2004, so more than a decade. And so baseball from the major league level is doing a lot, and basketball is especially under the relatively new commissioner Adam Silver is doing quite a bit. So Major League Soccer, not so much. Now, even with
we only have a minute, so
even with my criticism on the NFL, there are teams, 6 or 7, that are doing great things. They have solar in the parking lot, solar on the roof. The 49ers Levi Stadium is LEED certified gold. The new Falcon Stadium is going for LEED platinum. So there are certain teams that are doing great things. But your question was about the league, so that's where I went.
So we will break right here, but everybody keep it on hold because we'll be right back. Richard Solomon, Antonio Saillant, and Lew Blaustein, greensportsblog.com. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is the Great Thordini. You're listening to Richard Solomon on 88.1 FM WCWP.
Welcome back. Richard Solomon, Antonio Saillant, and Lew Blaustein, greensportsblog.com. So, Lew, during the break, you were talking about some really cool stuff, and you said you had some great stories to share. So why don't we pick it up right here?
Okay, great. Thanks. One is a story about a green sports startup that goes back to a conversation from the first segment about innovation. And this is a company in the athletic apparel market from Australia that is trying to become, in their words, the Under Armour of sustainable athletic apparel. The company is called Kusaga, Kusaga, Athletic. And what they do is they make running, tennis, and cycling attire, right now shirts, and then they will be making shorts and pants, and also some active wear, so stuff that you can wear out on the town, not while you're playing sports. But it's all the material is made from a mix of bamboo, it's eucalyptus, linen, and a couple of other like materials, and so it is completely biodegradable. It is completely recyclable, and the touch and feel is like is as good as an Under Armour piece of clothing, and the life cycle of it is longer. And further, what they are doing is creating a system that, because it is 100% upcyclable or reusable. So when you're done with it, you send it back to the company and they degrade it to its original form and then make another shirt. So it's a complete cradle to cradle company.
That's a fascinating story.
Athletic.
That's a fascinating story. Okay, what was the other one?
Okay, so the other one is about the greenest team in sports. And similarly, I'm hearkening back again to the innovation story. And when I think of innovation in any walk of life, or the innovation topic, it's where do the great innovations come from? They don't always come from the biggest companies. They come from, Bill Gates or Steve Jobs in some garage inventing something, and then they become a big company. Okay, so some of the great inventions or innovations in green sports are coming from minor league sports. And so now I'm going to take you to the fourth tier of English soccer. So what would be the equivalent of like low minor leagues in baseball in this, town in the middle of nowhere, which might be the equivalent of, Peoria, Illinois, but in England. And there's a little team called Forest Green Rovers. And they were in financial distress about 2009, 2010, and a local businessman bought them. Well, the guy the business that he was in solar and wind, and he saved the team from going under. But he said, as a condition of his ownership, he's going to make this team in the image of his company called Ecotricity, and he's going to make the greenest sports team in the world. And he's gone out and done that. Now, what does that mean tangibly? Well, he has put solar panels on the roof, which, that's on many stadiums, but this is like a 5,000-seater small minor league soccer stadium. He provides electric vehicles to his players, but again, these are low minor league players, so the electric vehicles may well be worth more than what they're paid in salary. The field is mowed by what's called a solar-powered mowbot. So it's a robot lawnmower that's powered by solar that's on top of the mowbot, which is very cool. But the coolest thing of all, and the most, what initially was controversial, is that the only food at all the concession stands and on the training table, all they serve is vegan food. So imagine vegan food at a Giants football game only. And you would think that there would be an uproar about this, and there was. But then the fans started to see that the food was tasty and good, and they also started to see that this green branding was giving this team in the low minor leagues a kind of a unique hook and was getting it attention. And it's actually turned out to be very successful. And the team, not to get into the inner workings of English soccer, but they have systems of relegation and promotion. So if you finish at the top of your league, you move up to the next level above. Well, they moved up this past season from the 5th tier to the 4th tier for the first time in like the 125-year history of the team. And it's a big deal. And so now this got covered by ESPN did a story on him, the New York Times did a story on him, and the New Yorker did a story on him after we did a story on him.
So you got the scoop. You got the scoop.
Got the scoop. Yep.
Well, Richard, that's you should ask Louis the question that we had. Yesterday we were talking about the food. So, because my stink was always, what is 100% sustainable, or what is sustainable? Let's say in a football game, in your point of view, and then Richard, you jump in.
Well, I always say, look at the food that's sold at arenas, at concerts, sporting events, whatever. It's always like, not to trash the food specifically, but it's always sugary, carby, not really plant-based foods, highly processed foods, highly salty foods. You think that, the teams that are hosting want to keep their fans live longer so they can be live. When you have lifetime tickets to you really want those people to keep coming back. And what's being done to make the food two things, either more sustainable, but if they make it more sustainable, I have a feeling it would be more healthy. Because if you look at the things that they sell, it's largely empty calories.
Yeah, I think the obviously the Forest Green Rovers example that I just talked about is the pièce de résistance. That's at the high end of the spectrum, and I don't know that there's anybody else that's doing that. I would if there is, write me at greensportsblog.com and I'll write about it. I do believe, and this is anecdotal to an extent, but also something that I've observed, is that there is definitely a movement towards more healthy items on menus at stadiums and arenas. That doesn't mean that the unhealthy items are going away. They're not. But it just means that they're adding healthier items. And this is true. I've seen it at Yankee Stadium. I'm in New York, but I've also seen it at Minute Maid Field in Houston, and I've seen it at Soldier Field in Chicago, and I've seen it at college sports events. So it's happening, but it's happening kind of in a rolling way, meaning it's not overnight, but it is happening. And then you also have some really forward-thinking teams like the San Francisco 49ers, and I hate to say it, the Red Sox, because I'm not a Red Sox fan, but they are growing produce on their roofs, and then they are using that produce that they have grown also at the Staples Center in not the Staples Center, the Home Depot Center where the LA Galaxy soccer team plays. And they are using the produce that they grow in the food service in the stadium. So that is healthy.
And local.
Local.
And local.
And
sure.
Yep. And so there are these movements afoot, but at some point you'll know that there'll be real change in this arena, pun intended, when they crowd out some of the really lousy food options. That hasn't happened yet. This right now is additive, but maybe that's the first step.
Because if you notice, if the change in food could occur, then the food at theme parks, beaches, which is kind of the same genre of food, maybe that can change a little bit. And then it'll be better for the health of all of us. It'll be better for our medical profiles. It'll actually keep people living longer and better. And it would also be much better for the environment all at the same time.
Absolutely. And the one thing I will say about sports in general, as compared to all levels of entertainment, sports still, with all the fragmentation going on, whether it be television, music, even in movies, all the different genres and ways you can consume entertainment. Sports, even though there's been erosion in its audience, relative to every other form of entertainment, sports has held it. And even with cord cutting on cable and all the other trends that are kind of making it difficult for sports still is the convener of humanity. That's why you have the Olympics and the World Cup things. Countries stop when World Cup games are played. And so what this blog is trying to do, and the green sports movement more broadly beyond my blog is trying to do, is say, okay, how can we use sports as a platform for environmental action, for raising awareness of and action about the climate issue and other environmental issues. That there's the line that Alan Hershkowitz, who was the founder of the Green Sports Alliance, famously says in all of his talks, something like 13% of Americans care about science, 75% of Americans care about sports. How do we get the 75% to care a little bit more about science, in this case, environmental and climate?
So I have a question along the levels of science and sports. What do we do with all those pool chemicals? We're talking about the Olympics. We're talking about recreation, entertainment. There's a lot of pool chemicals used out there, and I can't imagine that all the chlorine and all the things that the chlorine, bromine, all the things that they use, the anti-algae agents. I can't imagine that in the long run that material is good. I don't think it's good for it's not good for the swimmers. I don't think it's, your eyes burn when you're in the pool for a reason,
Yeah, I have not. That's one area that I have not delved into, but swimming is, depending on which study that you look at, is the third or fourth most popular sport in the world. So it is an issue. It's not something that I can talk intelligently about. But yeah, look, anything that is, if there is a more natural way of doing it rather than a chemical that can have side effects, that's the better environmental option.
Well, I know that they have saltwater pools, but I'm sure that if you're not near an ocean, I don't know how you get a saltwater pool.
Yeah, I think there's also, because it's saltwater, but there's, I think it's more challenging to maintain from what I understand. But again, this is not my area of expertise.
I'm sure the salt is corrosive and everything, believe me. No, but
it is. It's just like having some people when they have fish that lives in salt water. To maintain it, it's actually very hard. So the same thing would work as a pool. Same thing.
Yeah.
So it is. It takes a very long time, and it's tedious. So, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I've gone away to Aruba, and they have saltwater pools, and as opposed to chlorine.
Well, you guys have given me another area of inquiry. Now I got now you're gonna be seeing a Green Sports Blog column on swimming pools.
Well, as long as we get the credit for raising the question.
So thank you.
So in the 3 minutes that are left in this fabulous show, fast moving, of course, what is the other topics or insights that we didn't cover that that if we hung up the phone and you look back, I should have talked about this. Is there anything you want to add to the stories, the insights, the questions, the innovations, the trends, the challenges?
Well, one thing that I think deserves mention is the innovations happening in the college sports world in the United States. And, big-time college athletics is a uniquely American thing. It does not exist anywhere else in the world, to an extent in Canada, but nothing like here. And the college sports are greening, and I think that's going to be the first place where you're actually going to see where the stories of greening are going to actually come onto your television screen, which I think is the big thing. That's the big step in sports greening. Green Sports 1.0, the greening of stadiums, LEED certified, recycling, all of that's happening. That's like expected now. But Green Sports 2.0 is getting the story to the masses of people that don't go to games, but watch them on TV or on the internet or on their computer. And college sports, which has a cadre of idealistic students, and they study sustainability, many of them. They have green teams that go to the tailgate areas and help collect waste from tailgates and turn them into recycling and composting. Those are going to be great stories on college sports broadcasts about, kind of uplifting stories, and college sports can certainly use that. So I think if you're going to look for a place where you're going to, you sports fan watching at home, are going to hear about this, it's going to be in college sports first.
Right. I'll tell you, we are certainly the radio show of eco pioneers, and we are very proud that you're a part of our eco pioneer family. Because
it's good family to be in. Thank you for inviting me in.
Because the truth is, we have pioneers of all kinds, but you're our first journalistic pioneer, and that's a very important role because, like you said, getting that information out there, getting it to the 75% that love sports but maybe not so much science, it's a great thing. So we really applaud what you're doing. Our show is basically over, so we'll just leave it with Lew Blaustein, greensportsblog.com. Thank you so much for being our guest. We loved every moment of it. And for everyone listening out there, we'll see you in a week. Thank you for listening, as always.